All right. So, today's lecture is on Web3 Game Design Framework. So, just kind of like a list of things that I've been putting together while I've been doing a lot of like prototyping and developing blockchain games. So, the whole idea is to basically build games that players love and actually have a reason for using blockchain. I find that a lot of the blockchain games that have been developed either use blockchain very sparingly, use it for pretty much an opportunity to extract value, but we're looking at how we can use this amazing technology to give players real value and make developing of large scale gaming systems a lot cheaper. So, allowing indie game developers to build games that have the backends of these larger games with larger budgets, but utilizing the blockchain itself to cut those costs. So the barrier to entry is better. So this is kind of like a 7-step real world guide for Web3 game design. I'm going to try to make it practical. Um, Blockchain game development inherently is player first, and with utilizing these blockchain enhanced features. So this framework is inspired by like engineering principles and not hype. So we're looking at it as Web3 game development in the same way that we would look at traditional Web2 game development or just game development in general, but by enhancing value and compute using blockchain technologies or distributed ledger technologies or DLTs. So first thing, what are we going to be building? Like, what kind of game are we trying to design? So we can look at a survival-based game, an RPG, action. Is this an idle clicker type game? But there has to be like a core, like game type that we are going to build these other ideas on. We also want to think about the blockchain mechanics and how these work with the overall game loop that we've been talking about in previous lectures and the economic loop and how these two work together. We also want to define the types of players. So are these traditional Web2 gamers or are these like crypto native players? And there's a really good reasoning for this. The main one is the onboarding experience. If we have crypto native people as being, the vast majority of the people who are going to be playing our game, then that login process is going to look a lot different than if we're trying to be like a Web 2.5 and have, multi-party computation in order to take a Gmail account or some kind of email account and derive a Web3 wallet for the user. So where does the Web3 add value? Like, is it more for a token that has some monetary value? Is it for ownership of assets, which is usually the main case because it's something that you can kind of do without having the user be too involved. So we want to define this. This could be for decentralized compute. It could be for mitigating cheating and things like that. What parts of the game are going to be fully on-chain versus some things that may be well suited to be off-chain? So we want to start looking at the PX or the player experience. We want to be able to map our players' journey throughout the game and giving, rewards as they progress through, having, free mints to determine the level that the player is at, which is also connected to the character itself. We want to have like an invisible wallet onboarding experience, especially with Web3 games. This may be different when you're developing, dApps that are like DeFi in nature. But for a game, you want the login experience to be as similar to how a Web2 experience is, and do everything in your power, even if you need, say, players to have the token, which is totally fine. We play games and, I will go and buy, you know, 10,000 gold coins for $15, right? Um, but if that is going to be transferred to, say, like the ERC20 or whatever token type you're using, then you want to have the experience to be exactly the same. So if you need to onboard your players, using Rails for them to, purchase a certain thing in order to get something else, then you want to mask all of the Web3 stuff behind the scenes. Emotionally meaningful blockchain interactions, like, we want to make sure that if we are writing things to chain, that they have some value to the overall character. There's no sense in saying, oh, well, we have a Web3 game and everything is on chain, right? Like, we all know that that's pretty silly, right? So, make the parts that are supposed to be on chain, because remember, there's a monetary cost in order to write these things to chain. So even if you are working on a chain that is gasless like Scale, you still want to mitigate what is being written on chain, and having these particular things be valued. Just don't write things on chain just because you can. There's no race one for having a gazillion transactions and 99% of them are not worth anything. Reward without overwhelming risks, fees, complexity. If you can have some part that might be, off chain, that your player is progressing, they hit some main points, you transfer them a token from a backend wallet and server. These types of things are fine because it allows the player to still gain the ownership of the NFT, but they're not being, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not being taken away from the gaming experience in order to do something which is cool, but might not be something that needs to be removed from the gameplay in order to achieve. Understanding the technical needs. The first point here is very important, to choose the blockchain very, very carefully, meaning what are the end goals of, and what type of game is it, right? On the Scale network, you have, gasless transactions. On Base, you have very, very minimal payment for transactions. They have different experiences. So who is your target market and where are they? Like, build where your people are. So if your people are on Scale, you build for Scale. If your people are on Base, you build for Base. Or use like a create to, and you deploy your smart contracts to all the different chains that you want to support. And then you let your users define what experience that they want to engage with most, whether it be Scale, Base, Beam, AVAX, or Algorand. There's tons of different chains that you could do this, but with varying degrees. As the last example with Algorand, you'd have to, of course, like rewrite your smart contracts in like TypeScript or Python, and redeploy. Plan out your smart contracts, your NFTs, your monetary tokens, governance, all these different things, and allow there to be some cohesion for why these tokens exist, and that they have utility to the overall process of your game. How are you handling some on-chain, off-chain data, with indexers, databases, like we have tools here, Third Web, Moralis, The Graph. There's a plethora. of Unity SDKs from, different teams, or, you can just use something like Ethereum and do it low level yourself. Testing, security, and economic modeling. So you want to make sure that the smart contracts that you're using are being audited and using fuzz testing. So if you are building out your smart contracts in like Forge, allows you to have and test around specific edge cases. So it's a really good opportunity to think outside of what just your initial test. Like if this player has this and they don't have that, they shouldn't be able to do this. And you can kind of, fuzz around this and build out different scenarios, which is really cool. We've talked about this in previous lectures about simulating player behaviors and the economic stress, the amount of tokens that are coming out in the game with the amount of tokens that are being removed from the game, and making sure that the game loop, economic loop, and the token itself are all cohesive. Secure wallet flows and signature handling. So a lot of, sign a message, have a player do a certain amount of things, allow for another check-in, verify that the signer, the address of the signer who started all this is the same person that there is in the beginning, and you can have little checkpoints and make sure that people are not trying to use a different wallet or try to gamify it. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. You want to, of course, model your emissions, inflation, and burn mechanics. This can work in both, where if you're burning too many tokens, you're taking too many tokens out of the system and can cause issues, or the inverse, where you have too many tokens into the game and you just have an overinflated economy. So plan development and live ops. So the first thing is creating a minimal viable product, just like you would in any other type of development. Set milestones. So having like mint events and DAO proposals and tournaments, like doing these specific types of things holds the team to committing what they have on their roadmap, and it also allows for the community to have a lot of early introduction to the project. It can actually really help you with the planning and bringing out to the community what type of game you're trying to build, and have them say, hey, you know what, we would like to see this, or you know what, this is a great idea, keep running with that. And it allows you to find out what is going to work in your game a lot quicker, because when you're developing like Web3 games, usually the budgets are a lot smaller. There's a lot less room for error as far as spending a lot of time in developing a game and finding out that it's not really, commercially successful. It might be a great game, but it might just not be commercially successful. And you want to mitigate those risks as early as possible. And then we have, risk mitigation, multi-chain options, which is like, well, let's not just build our game for chain A and then things don't work out. And you're like, well, we spent the last, couple of years working and developing a game on a specific chain, and then it seems to not work out, and you have to kind of build new bridges and new relationships somewhere else. And audit timelines, these can take longer. Do the most amount of time reiterating over the security of your smart contract, getting that tighter and tighter. You can use a lot of tools out there, Slither, different AI agentic tools to simulate specific roles that can help you in the auditing process, so that when you actually send it off to a human auditor, then a lot of the work that they might have already come back with is already checked off, and they're just making sure that these things go to plan. But this is probably the most important part, is that when you're getting an audit, they are just making sure that the things that you are planning to do in your smart contract will not have adverse effects. It their job is not to make sure that this smart contract does what you envisioned it to do. Okay. So a lot of the planning that we've been doing from these previous lectures brings us to the point where, we're planning out our development, we're planning out what it is that these tokens are supposed to do. And then we get to the point where we actually start building out the smart contract, right? So make sure that this step is going, and don't think of it as not important, because it's probably one of the most important parts. Identify the ripple effects. So educate players about wallets and security. This is Web3. If you're looking from a Web2 to a Web 2.5 type of audience, then they are not going to probably be as well versed in this area as you might expect. Manage external communication like Discord, Twitter, X, Medium, have articles that you're putting out about the stuff that you're doing, right? Educate the players on the types of mechanics that you are thinking of, integrating into your game. So writing articles about what you're doing or new things that you're doing with your smart contracts and throwing them out there into the world is a great way of having your community be involved in the actual game development process. People out there, you can become like a subject matter expert in the area by writing a lot of articles and talking about this stuff. And then it just allows you to kind of think out what it is that you want to do. Because when you're building blockchain games, they are really different from our traditional Web 2 games, because everything is incentivized with something, and it's really cool. But it's definitely a different mindset you have to bring yourself around to. Like even in the game design and storytelling, has a more humanistic approach instead of like this, imaginary world. It's cool. Handle token liquidity and exchange listings if you are going to, launch your token out, and there's going to be like a pool and listing, there's a whole different set. That's like marketing and all that. And I might bring some people on that are on that side of it more to speak about their experiences, and update your documentation for every season. Basically, like every time that you're, releasing a new component to the game, you want to basically update your documentation for every time that you're putting out new stuff. You don't want your community to look back at old things that are no longer existing, that have been changed probably for over a year. And it's only because of the fact that you didn't update your documentation or update your commitments, that some of these parts go wrong. So take that into consideration. Understanding the broader context, anticipate any kind of regulatory risks. Like, do you need to do KYC or some kind of securities laws? Dream big. DAOs, player wrong expansions, AI integrations. Like think of all these cool things. Plan your scaling paths. Like, what types of L2s is there opportunity to make headways with these types of chains? Roll ups, sharding, risk v five. Nervos is really cool too. They have a really cool architecture. Find the architecture that fits the goal of your game, but also do the research to know where your players are. Like, where are your players at, right? You might be developing an EVM game, but your player base might be on Solana, right? So, like, just because like a game, and when you're taking the components that we're been going through this series of lectures, you can take this and then when you're ready to build the contract, you just build it out for whatever chain you do. So that's the one thing about this way of developing blockchain games is that when you're ready to design that smart contract or whatever's going to interact with the blockchain of choice, then you just take all the same principles and then design the contract. Build small today, but design for massive growth. This is the beauty of Web3 games is that we can design and build our games in really small pieces and then release those out to our communities and then have them engage, give us feedback, and put out new stuff. So final thoughts are want to make Web3 games invisibles. Players probably don't really care very much about the blockchain, to be honest with you. They might not even really even see the real value of why blockchain exists. But we as blockchain game developers know that there's tons of value. And there's so much more that we haven't even touched yet. But we don't need to have people not join the game because they have to write down a seed phrase or they have to connect this wallet or they have to change to this specific chain and all that stuff. Like they should not have to deal with that. That is our job as the Web3 game developers is to make that like, whoa, they didn't even know it was a Web3 game. That's when we win. When the masses are playing Web3 games and they don't even know the difference, then we've done our job. Respect players, design for joy, ownership, and community. Build sustainability, economies that endure are communities that grow. And the future of gaming, especially Web3 gaming, belongs to builders who understand both games and crypto. But the one main point of this last point here is that the future of gaming, it's not Web3 gaming, it's just gaming. And so those are the steps to how I would go about building, Web3 based games. If you stuck around, this long, geez, give the video a thumbs up, drop a comment down below. And yeah, what games are you guys playing? What Web3 games are you playing? What are you planning on building? Love to hear it. Love to chat about it. If you are building a blockchain-based game, need help or want to talk about it on a channel, please send me a message and I would love to have you on. And that's it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next one.